Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New World Eternum post-launch dev update. I'm Scott, the game director on New World Eternum. I'm here with Dave, the creative director.
Is the volume
Dan,
good?
give a nod.
Let me pause. Is the volume good for everybody? Because I have not adjusted this in a long time. Okay, somebody type in the chat. I think so. Yeah, all good? Okay, cool.
Design lead, and Katie, the live lead. Before we get going, oh my gosh, we launched.
We did it.
We've seen people pile in the beaches. It's been awesome. It has been so fun getting the console players interacting with the PC players and watching all that fun stuff. Any stories you all want to share about the launch?
Okay, also, I'm going to try not to interrupt this too much, but if you're a PC player and you were like shitting on a console player, like not letting him into your company or something like that, A, you're a dick, B, you're the person that's killing the game. Please don't do that. My company included.
I mean, I really enjoyed seeing the raid. Like the first time seeing that completed was epic. Now people are optimizing it. It's like really cool.
Yeah, and mine is related to that because we just saw the first sub 30 minutes and actually first sub 20-minute raid run, which is really awesome, but also means we're going to make the next raid really hard.
I'm loving it being on console, so it's my living room. The whole family gets to play. It's really fun.
The response has been great. Thank you all for coming and checking it out. Like, I can't tell you how exciting it is for all of us to put this out there and see everyone playing it and giving us the feedback. So we're really
gaming.
Appreciative. Couldn't be happier.
Hey,
So I know
couches
some
are
of you
awesome.
are joining us for the first time. And what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about where we plan to go with New World in the future. We're going to start with Season 7 so we can walk you through all of the cool things coming out in Season 7 and, sneak peek. They're pretty freaking cool. Beyond that, we have this thing that we're going to talk about called in development. So these are a bunch of features that we're working on. We are not ready to commit to a timeline, but we want to give you that insight and get some feedback from you, which will help us prioritize which ones come first and where we go. And then we're going to talk about some things that are in the early ideation phase. This is where we just want to get your sense which of these you like more than others, because this is where you can have a big impact on that, on where we go with the game this year.
This also, I need to back up a second. This will also probably determine priorities as well in terms of like what the community wants. So everything for this season is basically guaranteed. So this is like 100% chance. Like in development, this is likely something like 70 to 80% chance. Like it's very likely that something will get through unless something like major happens and they have to block it for release. In exploration, this is stuff that's like, it could happen, but it also could end up in like a state where they can't prioritize it and they're prioritizing other things instead of prioritizing this. So it might never happen even if it's in exploration. So it's something you have to like treat that roadmap a little bit lighter for.
On where we go with the game this year. But with that, Dan, you're going to take us through this.
Yeah. So next we're going to dive into these things.
Wait, did he say that was all coming out this year?
The impact on that, on where we go
There's
with
no
the game
way.
this year.
Oh my God, he did.
But with that, Dan, you're going to take us through this.
Yeah. So next we're going to dive into these things one by one. We'll bring in some other folks to the table and gobble, gobble. Let's go.
Gobble, gobble.
Yeah, no, that's, if they are actually able to deliver on the roadmap, jumping to the roadmap for a second, if they're able to deliver on all of this by this year, I would be amazed. If they deliver on these two things this year, I would, like by this year, I mean up until like November-ish of next year, if they delivered on this left bullet and this middle bullet, I would be amazed. Like in exploration, I expect it to take like 1.5 to 2 years.
Hello, everybody. So now we are joined by 3 new faces at the table. We have 3 lead designers. We have Joel of Systems and Seasons. We have JR of Combat and Modes. And we have Chad of AI and Encounters. And we together are going to be talking about some things that are in our next season, which is coming at the top of next year. Obviously, we just got done shipping a big console game, and we're getting back up and running into content and feature development. And we'll take you through one at a time. The first one being something we've been talking about for a long time, finally have, super excited. Joel, do the honors. Tell us about Seasonal Worlds.
Yeah, this is one that I'm personally really excited about and something that I really have been invested in. So Seasonal Worlds are a season-based world that will last for the time of the season, so roughly around 3 months. that has unique rule sets where we really flip things on their head. The goal being that we provide players with a really unique experience that breaks the rules, that in the case, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, maybe PvP is always on these rules or on these worlds.
You gave it away.
I did give it away. As you know, the first server, not as you know, but as you know now, the first server is PvP focused, and that's.
This is definitely like a bit of a gimme, but yes, the first world that is coming out will be a PvP. If you want to call it Rust-like, if you want to call it Albion-like, you want to call it full loot, like that kind of world, where you level up to a certain point, and then this is turned on, and you can't go back. And then after that point, every time you die, you're from my understanding right now, you're dropping basically everything. They could segment this into tiers, kind of. I need to wait and see a little bit further, but this in a way is sort of like beta testing a feature, and it's sort of like, hey, what if we actually did this? Like it's a little bit more, like he says, it's a bit more experimental, and that's like the goal, so that they could try new things. Something
that's near and dear to me. I've played a lot of games over the years that I really enjoy that risk-reward feeling. The first server is at level 15. You'll be fighting other players. We've created a unique set of item and gear that you'll be able to craft. It's very heavily crafting focused, which I also really like, where the player will feel powerful in this gear, but the risk that comes with this gear that you'll be able to craft is that it drops on death, that it has durability. We're pulling back some of those old mechanics that don't exist in the normal world.
Resources and the gear.
So that gear specifically drops when you die. Versus right now in the PvP island, like you will drop all the mats when you die. So that is different.
Yes.
I'll drop on death.
The resources, well, the new resources to craft our special new really kind of super items that are on par with, say, artifacts in this server, those drop on death.
Yep.
But you'll be able to craft some more basic gear that's still pretty high gear score with some more basic resources like iron, timber, and hide.
Yeah.
You'll be able to craft your normal gear that's still really high gear score, but you'll need to wear that special gear that's dropped on death to go get these new resources to craft these really cool big items.
That gear also, like, you should.
So it's like if we had the system right now in the current game, right? This would be like 0 to 700. You're perfectly fine. 700 to 725. You need this special gear that's dropped on death. Like that would be the equivalent of this gear, I'm guessing, for the current game. But that gear jump that you get from 700 to 725, that's not super significant. But like going from no artifacts, like he says, to artifacts is like very, very significant. Like if I still have New World opened up here, like if I am able to pick up a passive 20% armor increase on every single piece of my armor, like you know how insane that is if I just have over 100% more armor, but if I die I lose that all. So it's like it can be very, very powerful, but the risk reward feature is a very big factor. This has been implemented in other games with full loot systems like Albion that has enchanted base gear that people like to run for specialized builds. For example, there's a gear piece that we like to call a bomb or a bird. It's basically you launch a nuke and the nuke will destroy everything if you have really high endgame gear. But it's also like worth the equivalent in New World of probably like 400 to 500k every single time you die. So it's like you can make a lot by killing people with that set, but if you die, you lose it all. So it's like very, very high risk, high reward, and it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Talk about, like, we went pretty crazy with it, right?
It's
because
nuts.
It can drop on death. Like we did things that we normally would be kind of leery balance.
Did you mention that it breaks too?
It does break.
Yes.
But to JR's point, we took some of these pieces of gear and we.
So the reason why you have to have it break is so that people can continue to craft that gear, so that it keeps creating that crafting economy, right? If the gear doesn't break and it drops on death, then a few concentrated players get the gear and like it just keeps getting passed around and no one creates this gear anymore, right? So you have to have it break at some point. Albion has the exact same mechanic. Worked very, very well for that game, in my opinion. Some people don't like it, but I played that game for 3 to 4 months, so kind of biased, and it is a very, very interesting system.
We really push the limit on them to make them feel special, to make them feel like there's impact. These should feel on par to artifact items, if not farther in some cases.
Very farther.
Yeah. So
Harry Farmer?
really the goal
Oh,
is
boy.
how crazy is going to be, how much are we going to shake up the meta, how much of a different experience can we provide to you, while still some of that familiar feeling, that core of the game that is so much fun.
Wonder what happens if you
so we can
transmog
kind of
this.
experiment and again, find what's fun to
Because you
you
can
or
hide that
fun
you have
to
the
me
gear.
or fun to each other. I'm really looking forward to what we can do with these systems.
It feels a lot like the original New World Alpha, but with all of the QOL and content that it now has.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
We should also reiterate, like, so it's a brand new server, like that literally wipes every season. So you also get that new player experience
Yep.
every season.
Yep.
If you
Totally
like
economy
that.
You get those hordes of players coming in from the beach. You get the camps on the ground. You're going to have a lot of like death and maiming getting to the settlements. That's my jam. I'm a somewhat of aggressive player, so I'm excited to see how players are going to treat this, how they're going to form up and protect each other, but also potentially rob each other
And
from
also,
their gear.
it feeds into the territory system too. It brings those big stakes to this. Crafters are now like a necessary part of your war machine as you take over the server. It's all there.
And there's a lot of little
That's the beauty
fine-tuning
of
quality
it.
of life tweaks that we're also looking at as well. So like, I know you just did the MSQ. We were looking at ways to make it so you can completely level by crafting if you want to.
Yeah.
Again, we'll have more details on these things in the future, but we're really trying to fine-tune these little experiences to feel like you can play how you want, and that it's, again, slightly familiar, but completely different when you play through it. And
So think about this. I'll bring up an example for you guys. Say in game right now, I want to go level a new weapon. Like say I want to go level Great Axe to level 20. If I wanted to optimize this in the current game, you probably see people saying X Tortor, and like you go to this specific spot, you sit here for an hour or two, you get this maxed out. In this new version of the game, if I go here, someone could kill me and just take my set. Like you have to like change fundamentally like how you play the game in every single regard, and it's not a ton of work from an AGS standpoint compared to other features that they've implemented, but it is like a tremendous amount of time that can be used to optimize this kind of mode. So it's very, very interesting. Very excited to see where it goes. Not sure how many people will engage with it, but considering it's only going to be one server to start, I imagine that server people will like it on that server, and it is experimental, and I'm kind of excited to see where it goes.
I'm really excited to be bringing these servers to you.
That's awesome. It's a whole new frontier. I mean, it's changing up all the time too, which is great.
Yes, we have, I can't wait to tell you about all the ideas we have for future ones. And of course, they become places to experiment with things that we might bring into the main game. But that's not all. One of the other things that we're very excited to bring you, JR, I won't upstage you. What are we bringing?
Okay, so we know OPR is one of our most popular modes.
Yep.
And we've had the same map since launch, pretty much, right? It came out shortly after that. So I'm excited to announce that we are in development on a new OPR map, and
Let's go.
We're going to actually have it be in a preview form for Season 7. We're going to have it on for a weekend, and we want to get the player feedback on it, and so they can, you guys, we want you to help us to develop the map. We want to make sure that this map is lives up to the expectations that you have, having waited for so long.
And later in the video, we'll talk more about it. But I mean, this is just the beginning.
New
right?
OPR map.
We're spinning up multiple maps.
Yeah, absolutely. The modes pipeline is in full gear now. We're going to be making new game modes and new maps and for existing modes. And yeah, this new OPR map is kind of like the first one out of the gate.
Yeah, we wanted to show it to you, even though it's
New
not
modes too.
Potentially not fully ready. Again, to get that feedback, but also we're just so excited. Can't wait. Next on the list is kind of a few small things that we're doing for mutations, which are
we only need
expeditions
daggers.
in the game have normal and mutated levels. So for M3, which is the highest level, we're adding these to the instanced matchmaking system. In order to make sure this goes smoothly, we are unifying our mutations. Tell us about that, Chad.
Yeah, so big.
I do need to stop this because Mark does bring up a good point that AGS doesn't necessarily deliver on everything that they promise, and I do have to point that out with the past roadmap that they sent out. I don't want to gripe on it for too long, but this is the Season 4 roadmap, and everything crossed out was not delivered on. So it's like you do have to treat it with a grain of salt. I'd argue that the way that they phrased it this time is probably a little bit better, but the last time they delivered on maybe 20% of what they said they would. So you guys did point out earlier, it is probably fair to say that the changes that they expect in the roadmap, like the stuff in season 7, this is probably, like I said, 100% chance. It's probably closer to like a 60 to 80% chance. And like in development's even lower than that, and exploration's a little bit lower than that. If you look at it historically, if you look at it currently and like what they're saying, they seem relatively confident that they're going to be able to get this put out so far. So, fool me once, fool me twice, but I'm hoping that they're able to deliver again.
Big ticket item here is that all the currently active mutated expeditions will now share the same mutation. So elemental, promotions, curses, all those will be the same across all of them, which means a lot less re-gearing, gemming your gear, and hopefully just more time spent fighting and having a good time collecting loots.
And then the other thing we're doing is we're increasing the quality of the rewards in the M3s.
Yeah. So we're looking at adding crafting materials into mutated expeditions, as well as in raids, that together, when they're combined, you'll be able to craft new 725s. So this will be an alternative source and give meaning to want to go back into these expeditions and make sure that you're actually having fun in the content you want. We're going to continue looking at that and improving it. For now, we like where it's at, and we think that it'll give more players a reason to go visit this content.
So adding more options to your endgame content.
Yes.
Along those same lines, we're also adding 2 new daily solo trials to the roster.
3 new solo trials.
Oh,
So we've got, we're adding Mother's Dream, which is Emperor Zhu, Tempest Mind, which is Isabella, and Daichi Saito. So that's adding to our roster. So you should be seeing those in your list every day.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad.
The main gripe with the soul trials right now is they were fun for about a day or two and then immediately not used because the content isn't really usable from an endgame perspective, and it's very, very simple to complete it. I think they need to make something like some sort of materia that can be used to craft something from the soul trials or something like that. Like there needs to be a little bit more meaning to it, but they are kind of fun. From a new player perspective, I think they're wonderful. From an endgame player perspective, it is like I can quite literally just go there, hold down my M1 button, and do it, and not have to worry about any of the mechanics. Because I think some of them honestly probably deserve a little bit of balancing, but for the audience they target, I think they do a good job.
And then to round out the season, we have a few things that we like to do every season.
Basically.
Starting with combat balance updates.
Yeah, so obviously, this is something we do every season. This season, some of the things that we focused on was time to kill. Something we've been seeing in PvP a lot. The fight's going a little too long. So we're making some adjustments to consumables and some of the perks. And then we're also looking at balance around target lock.
I've heard that they're mainly looking at targeting conditioning is like the big one for this. Like conditioning is far too strong, and I 100% agree. And that will kind of put stuff more in line of like where it should be. Like right now, it's basically every single build. It's like, oh, you have to run conditioning. It's not like, oh, you have to run health, or like, oh, you have to run resilient anymore. Conditioning is the new thing where you kind of need to have it, and that secondary perk that reduces damage is like a little bit less necessary. But there's a little bit less of a balance than there used to be, and people just stack the heck out of defensives, and because they multiply and the defensiveness gets exponentially stronger as you have more defensives, it inherently creates a kind of an unbalanced system there.
Target lock, you say?
Yeah, we turned it on in PvP for the Eternum launch, and we've been keeping an eye on the feedback. And
by the way, thanks again for all the feedback right before launch as we went through beta. It was very helpful, and we made some changes. And
yeah, absolutely. We did tone it down quite a bit from what it was in beta. And we're going to be continuing to tune things. One of the changes that's coming up in season 7 is actually the blunderbuss was a problem. We had nerfed the damage going into launch. Now we've reversed that, and instead we've replaced it with some extra inaccuracy in target lock as kind of a balancing.
So the issue here with blunderbuss is before it shoots 6 pellets, right? On average, I would hit maybe 3 of these pellets if I was a normal player. And they basically made this so it always hits 6 pellets, but it does 5% less damage. So it's like, okay, I need to make blunderbuss so that it hits 3 pellets because that's the average amount of pellets per player that actually hits. So I need to have it programmed in 50% accuracy or something like that. Like it inherently has to be inaccurate while target lock is enabled in order to balance for this. The way that it's balanced for other weapons in particular is because they fire projectiles. So in close range, they are accurate, but in medium to long range, they're not accurate. And the other way that it's technically balanced for is headshots. There's a headshot multiplier that is applied, so it's better to manually aim and hit the head. In reality, most weapons that have that headshot multiplier enabled, which are musket, bow, and blunderbuss, it's not actually worth it to go for the head. So I'd beg to differ about that one, but it makes sense to have this accuracy modifier like that. That's in the right direction. Or you just disable aim lock, which is what most of the PvP players would prefer, but like I digress.
Factor.
Yeah.
And we're going to be continuing to make tweaks like that in the future.
Yep, absolutely. There's also new artifacts, new perks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be introducing 8 new artifacts in Season 7. 7 of them will be weapons, and there's one accessory, which is an earring.
Nice.
Ocean's Peace, it's time. For people that don't know what Ocean's Peace is, it's a earring artifact that got removed from the data mines at one point that gave 2% health regen, max health regen per second, and 2 stamina per second. So it was incredibly good looking for tank players, and all the tank players are really, really excited to get it. And then it was never released, and all the tank players have been really sad for about the last year. So we're really excited for that. All the weapon artifacts are likely the weapons that have not received their second artifact yet. So you think of like Blunderbuss hasn't received a second artifact yet, Bow hasn't received a second artifact, Rapier hasn't received a second artifact, and like kind of go down the line there. But artifacts or weapons like Flail have received 2 artifacts, so they likely will not receive another.
And yeah, there's some interesting combos that are going to come
Fire
out of that.
stuff, yep.
There's an ice gauntlet in there that I really enjoy. It's a really cool ability on the gauntlet that lets me, when I ice tune, give me a large amount of regen at the end of that. So I'm excited to try out and see what I can actually get away with that, or if I still die. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's just going to be hella strong for tanks unless it doesn't persist on weapon swap. And the other thing to consider is that the Ice Gauntlet's tomb right now works off of base health, not max health. So it's inherently weaker than a lot of people think. Your base health in New World is 8,024 versus my max health on my current character is about 30,000. So when it's scaling off this lower value, the perk is inherently less good. So it'll be interesting to see if it works off of base health or max health. One of the perks that works off max health in the game right now is health, which states it works off base health, but actually works off max health. And then Ice Gauntlet's an example of a perk that works off base health instead of max health.
Sounds like trouble.
Yeah, well,
That's his nickname.
That's a fun.
Joel Trouble Clift. And then, well, why don't you bring us home with talking about the seasonal events?
Yeah, so we're doing some refreshes on a few events. We're looking at Legacy of Crassus and upping the rewards a little bit more meaty rewards past level 700. Same with Siege of Sulfur. And then we're going to bring a little bit more rewards into Rabbit Revenge. That's a little bit more fun costumey. Maybe a little bit of trolley in there as well. We'll see how it goes. I'm hoping to get those events to console players for the first time as well, as they haven't seen these events.
So that's everything in next season. We're very excited about the OPR map.
Yeah.
Very excited about seasonal worlds.
Absolutely.
More details about both coming soon. And remember, we're just getting started. Now, let's talk about what's in development. So in development is somewhere in a more midterm timeline. We're definitely looking into stuff, but there's still plenty of room to discover. And yeah, so I mean, there's tons on this list in no particular order. We can start with
Invasion.
Thank you.
Why I like Invasion
All right,
as something
Dave.
that we're working on is because I think it's super cool content. It's sort of unique to New World, this idea of battling hordes of people. But, you know, the content is a little limited in terms of participation because it's only a set time. It can only take this many people. So what if we turn this into a mode, right? Like I think we're starting to make more and more modes. The activity screen is a great place to sort of like, what do I feel like doing? So like, let's get Invasion into a mode. And I think
actually
once you
kind of
start
agree
going in that frame of mind,
this
I'm sure lots
idea.
of things can like, could we add some more enemies? Could we add maybe mutations? What happens to the rewards? Like lots of ideas start to come.
So the main issue with invasions right now is that you only need like 20 to 30 people to do them at a max level, and then you can do the invasion. But for like lower level people, it's a really good way to get engaged with a large group. So like there will be 50 people in there that want you to get into a Discord to get coordinated for an invasion, and that's like kind of a baby step for other modes. So I think this is actually a really effective way to build a medium to large scale sort of community, and honestly is pretty smart. That being said, they do need to be reworked to some extent, and he's also addressing that here. As a person that no longer runs invasions due to it overlapping with my raid times, I'm okay with making it its own mode. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like adding more variety to the mode. Like we have all these different kinds of corrupted enemies that we aren't using in the mode currently. So like bringing those in and like having it vary up like per season even, like be awesome.
Yeah, it's great content. I mean, speaking of modes, I mean, that's one of the things that your team's looking into more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually prototyping lots of different kinds of game modes, things you might have seen in other games, like Capture the Flag, that we think would actually work really well in our game. Also, like a Battle Royale mode, like a lot of those systems that make up Battle Royale already exist in the game. So like, you know, mashing them together, creating a queuable mode for that.
Yep.
So the theme here is reusing content that's already existed in the game, right? We talked about that at the beginning with the PvP server, if you will. Like that's going to reuse content from the game itself, let you be on that server. Very, very unique experience. We have the invasions as a mode, again, reusing the content that's already existed, like Capture the Flag. That's going to be reusing the world that's already existed, right? Like, shoot, I need to move all AFK. But like, if you can, I think the key to make New World like prosper in that sense is like take a resource that's already been made because it will take limited development time and use it as a mode. Like imagine, like what if I had Capture the Flag between the Monarch's Bluff Fort and the Cutlass Keys Fort, and you had to fight like all the way down this beach or something crazy like that, or you have to figure out some sneaky way to get all the way around, but it's going to take a lot more time. Like there's a lot more, like you can get very, very interesting. I imagine they won't get into that sort of depth, and instead it will just be like, okay, let's do OPR, but let's make one base right now like A or C, like a flag, and the other one's another flag or something like that. But they could definitely get creative with this, and I like the general scope of reusing old content. I wish they'd expand that a little bit more to open world content, because I think open world content is the biggest strength of New World that's not properly utilized right now. But nevertheless, it's a good direction.
And then also like so kind of like a framework for new modes might be like doing like more of a seasonal type experience where
Defend
every
Monarch's
season
Castle.
there's like a featured game mode for that season, and we vary it up like every season.
Yeah, I love that. Like even something like Capture the Flag. One season maybe we try with mounts, the next season without. Like there's ways you can sort of like keep it fresh and interesting.
Yeah, it increases variety, and then it also kind of keeps the number of modes like maintainable, so that we don't split up matchmaking too much and stuff like that. For sure.
Exactly. Yeah, like every new queue that we add like splits our player base, so we want to avoid that.
Yeah.
But the way that you avoid this system is what you do in Overwatch, right? Overwatch, you hit one button to matchmake, and that one button will take you to 5 different PvP modes. You can't guarantee which PvP mode comes up, but in order to be a good PvP player, you need to be good in all those different PvP modes. And I think that kind of system would help solve this issue, and as well as bring in variety, right? Like you also have to think about this from a perspective that New World has had one OPR map for 3 years. I don't think people are going to get too upset if they rotate between OPR, domination, or whatever you want to call it, team deathmatch, and like Capture the Flag, or like whatever modes you want to call from like Call of Duty, whatever other game you want to steal. Like people will not be upset for that. The variety, people are generally, I think, a little bit more for variety at this point, and I think more content is definitely welcome, and more risk taking in that regard is more welcome. I imagine that there will be bugs that are introduced for this at this point. I feel like you kind of have to embrace the bug world and just get rid of the exploits, because there's, even with more time, it feels like there's still a large amount of bugs and exploits to the point where it's not really manageable, and or do what they're kind of starting to do and release stuff in like an alpha or a beta phase, like something like what Ashes of Creation's doing, like where they have this actual like alpha phase that's probably going to be going on for like about a year, and they're going to actually just test a bunch and refine a bunch of different features. Like that idea of like using player feedback in an early form is not a bad idea as well. Like if they wanted to do something a little bit more temporary, use that, iterate upon that, like I wouldn't be opposed to that. But generally, more content I think in this game is welcome, because right now the game, from a normal player standpoint, I think has about a shelf life of about a month to 2 months, and then people will come back in the next year.
And then we've talked a lot about modes and how like they sit really well next to our open world, but like the open world and the persistent new world experience is super important, and that's where we're looking at all kinds of stuff, like QOL things.
Yeah, like one that I know we're thinking about is storage, right? Like how many times have you been crafting and you're like, where is this material? Or you're you're about ready to run a mutation and you need a special piece of gear, right? So like if storage was much more global, what would that be like?
Still filterable. You want to be able to make sure you can find those things or sort it in a way that's meaningful to you, but not have to chase it down every time you want to do an action like crafting and other places like that, right? Pull it out.
Yep. Yeah, this is one where we have to kind of solve like more edge cases than you think of. There's tech, but I mean, we definitely want to do it and get it out there.
Yep.
Similar to
Big
modes,
downside.
also one of the pieces of endgame content that we love, but we want to try to improve upon is wars.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So I bet that the majority of the player base has not experienced a war because it is very exclusive
They have
content,
data to
but it
prove
is so
that.
good. It's so fun. So our goal is to provide a way for the rest of the players to try it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thought is that we would do some kind of like private war system or like a pickup war where any company can challenge another company to a war.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a way of like, bringing war to the masses.
I love it, right? Because there's
So there is a balancing thing that Dave might talk about here in a second, but it is a company to a company, so you need to be in a company. I inherently think this makes some sense because the issue of doing it as a completely pickup thing versus another completely pickup thing with a war is it's a highly coordinated game mode, usually revolving a pre-war plan. You actually go into war, you try to execute that plan, you have someone guiding you through that plan. It's usually known as the in-game lead or IGL, and then you also have separate communication between people in your actual group because you're working within your group to accomplish a smaller objective for that larger objective's purpose. So there's a lot of different layers that are involved here, and without getting the actual company to be coordinated and run something like this, it will not do as well. And this also solves the issue of having having too few territories for too many players in the same server for war content now to make this more of an instance mode. And I think that's just a generally good thing for the game. Would also like to see a company versus company OPR mode. Yeah, exactly. There's stuff like that that could be iterated upon. And like say there's a matchmaking rating tied to your company's stuff, and the highest companies get a special reward or something like that. Like, there's like little things like that that could improve stuff very significantly.
so much that war relies on right now. Like, it's so important that people don't want to take risks. But if you make it something that like any two companies can set it up, you don't even have to be in a company. Maybe just any 50 people can get together. It allows people to try new builds. It allows people to try new people rather than slot the exact same people in every time. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's a place right now where you can't really slot somebody unless you have no way to vet them or audition them.
Right, which is why,
like you said, just more people being able to experience it at all.
That's exactly why VOD reviews are such a big thing. In order to get slotted for a war, you need a VOD. But if you don't have a VOD, how do you get started? And it's very, very difficult. Like you literally, like every single war slot's like, okay, prove yourself to me. Prove that you're capable of doing your job well, so that I could hold this territory and make money. And it's like it gets very, very competitive, very, very fast.
So we've heard from a lot of you, and we completely agree that the start game for a new world is now better than it's ever been. The mid game is feeling good. It's really when you get to the end game and the kind of like systems and dailies take over. That's where we think we can double down and make things start to really click and awesome. We've all got thoughts on this, but Joel, why don't you begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I want to say we hear you and we understand that a lot of the older content, we really want to refresh that. We want to make it feel like you can go back to Reek Water and have impact. You can go back to really crafting high-end gear, finding unique things from crafting. In an earlier segment, we talked a little bit about how we're improving item crafting from mutated dungeons. We really want to take that to another level across the board. One example would be looking at reputation systems for some of the zones and being able to build up and kind of have a reason to go somewhere you might not normally go, build up, get better rewards, have reasons to go craft there, have reasons to go do different gameplay elements such as ECRs, such as questing, potentially new gameplay activities in some of those areas, new collections. We're really trying to push kind of play how you want to play.
Yeah.
Part of
It's a
that's
sandbox.
like making rewards that you care about, right?
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
so it's like,
This also ties back to that idea of like the full loot system that you was talking about earlier, that you don't necessarily have to go through the main story to level to max level. It's not this completely catered experience. You also could go through a sandbox route if you want to, like whatever you want to do. And that's like, I'd say an improvement upon traditional sandbox games where there is a path if you want a path, but if you don't want a path, you're not necessarily forced to follow the traditional path. And I think that would generally be pretty awesome if they're able to accomplish that, but that's a really, really big goal that a lot of games have spent like 5 to 10 years to try to solve, and not everyone has solved yet.
in the past, we've had just like this gear score chase, and then you get the perks you want, and then
What's the Dave theory? That's my Dave theory. It's just above. It kind of implies open world, which is good because he talks about gathering a lot. Yeah, like more focus on that. I mean, the main issue that comes back to open world right now is that you have all these fast travel points, which I think were really, really good and necessary when mounts didn't exist. But now that mounts exists, I'd argue that it's better to probably retract that a bit. And it feels weird to say I want them to take away fast travel points, but I kind of want them to take away fast travel points. I'm not going to lie. I think there's too many. And you don't actually get to like really see the world until you're leveling again, right? Like I think everyone experienced that on Fresh. It's like, oh my gosh, I haven't been here in like literally a year. Like at all. Because it's not part of this like ultra optimized, refined route or whatever. So it's like I'm a little bit more for open world stuff than I used to be in the past. My Dave theory is seeing them so involved with the group implies is getting more control or involvement. Didn't see much Scott and Katie. Oh, yeah, likely. You could also tell. Do I want to say this? I appreciate Dave. Dave's like usually the guy that like we look at and it's like, okay, Dave listens to us from a community standpoint, and like Dave's hair is starting to turn gray. So maybe he was kind of stressed out before, but I don't like. I feel like he's generally done a pretty good job at being open and communicative. Red shirt sounds like Dave. What I love, yeah, Joel. Yeah, no, Joel sounds pretty passionate. I like Joel. I don't like. I don't think we've seen Joel before, but he seems like he's a good fit for the role he's in. Wear gray.
you're kind of done, right? Like, but we're talking about having a larger variety of perks that are like more of a horizontal progression. Like something the combat team's been talking about actually is like we have like one unique perk per ability, but there's nothing to stop us from making like 10 unique perks per ability, right? Like and having just a lot of variety and like changing up your gameplay. That kind of is more of like a horizontal thing.
And then taking that a step further and potentially putting those perks in unique places. So I have to go to this dungeon or Reekwater or this zone to be able to get those perks. And also making those perks have more of an impact in different game modes and different areas of the game as well will really help flesh some of this out. Really make crafting meaningful is something that I'm personally passionate about. I love to go gather, click rocks, whatever you want to say in the game. That's my jam. I love doing those type of things. You'll find me gathering more often than not. But I really want to make sure that crafting has that meaty impact that we had previously. You're able to craft some of the best gear, and it has a reason and a purpose is one of the biggest goals we have for this. Beyond that, really making sure that you can kind of play the way you want and go to the zones that you want or the modes that you want, and making sure that those rewards are meaningful, not just go to the raid, not just go to Sandworm, and not just go get golden coconuts and other things like that.
Yeah, no, you're saying the right things.
Yeah, I think that's
the part that my gripe with this stuff is I'm surprised there wasn't foresight for this before the patch, but they're saying the right things for the current patch.
the best summaries. Like play the way you want and always feel like
that's
you're
perfect. That's
making
exactly
an
what
impact. Like
accurate.
you're progressing in some way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. And there's so many ways we can do that. I love the idea of the reputation systems because it's like a new level of meta progression. And I think there's some neat ways we could do that versus just a very grindy way, make it more quest oriented or something like where you feel like you're unlocking powers in a zone. You know, I think there's cool ideas there.
And this is another place where seasonal worlds kind of help us experiment and try out new systems. Look for more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a good point about that, Joe. So I would say like of the 100% of my friends that started playing New World when it first came out, like maybe 80% of them play, and or sorry, not 80%, 20% of them play and 80% left. Of those 80% that left, a lot of people are like, I really like New World, I like all these systems, but there's just no new content for me from the end game, so why would I play right now? It's like a lot of those questions where you have people that are like, oh, don't play New World. I have 4,000 hours in the game, but trust me, bro, don't play New World. There's no content past a certain point. It's like, okay, there is content. The problem is that it's not renewable enough at a certain point, and that these are issues that are being talked about in terms of being fixed. The crazy thing is I'm 20 minutes into here, and like, it feels like we're 20 minutes into this video, and every single thing that has been mentioned so far has some permutation that is going to involve PvP players to some capacity. It's going to involve crafting systems to some capacity, and it's going to involve PvE players to some capacity. Like, tying all those systems together is something that, if it was done really, really well, I think New World would be like amazing, and that's like part of the potential of New World, if you want to call it that, that people always talk about. And I think games like Ashes of Creation recently are starting to bring to light. I like that they're stealing ideas from other games, like this full loot idea from Albion. I know a lot of PvP players that are very against this. I was also very against this until I tried Albion, and then I was like, oh my god, this actually solves like 90% of the issues that New World have, and I like the idea of going for some system like that, because it creates a sense of, you have to do this, and like, if your gear breaks, right, you have to craft your gear again, so now crafting's involved. If you have to craft gear, now you need materials, now your people that are gathering are involved, and they like all tie together, and your PvP players can kill other players to get their gear, get the materials, so that it's like there's like a good cat and mouse kind of balanced game to it. It creates a lot of renewable content and creates a lot of different avenues to obtain like more rewards for the end game, rather than just like mass spam potion crafting, which is what I'm doing right now, and like silly things like that. Like it currently makes the game systems like build upon themselves, like just naturally, and doesn't require a ton of development tools to do, right? It's like, again, coming back to that same idea of renewable content. Like, this is all focusing on renewable content that will recreate itself, and that's how you kind of create an end game experience with a game like this. New World is a perfect foundation with nothing else. I still recommend it though. $40 and play a game that has very little comparisons in MMO. Yeah, exactly. And like, to drive that point home, like, you look at a game like Throne and Liberty that came out recently, right? Like, a lot of players from New World have left to go to Throne and Liberty, also by published by AGS for all it's worth. But not actually made, but published by them. But Throne and Liberty's endgame effectively makes it so that you cannot go try out a different class super efficiently. So like, New World's biggest strength, I would argue, is the class system, where you can play Sword and Shield with any other weapon and nothing is bound there. In that endgame system for Throne and Liberty, you effectively have to commit from level 1, hey, I'm going to be playing Sword and Shield Flail on this character, and that is all I can play without having to spend a good amount of money, and in order to compensate for the time required to get those leveled up. And I think New World does that very, very well, and I'm hoping that it will be able to utilize these new systems and kind of carry that forward as well.
If we can get this end game ripping, like we have the sort of the early and middle game, I think that's the sort of the last piece, like you said, that could really sort of keep people playing and excited.
And Absolutely. Like, it's going to take a lot of work. Like, we have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that we want to do, which is why you'll see on our...
I would argue the middle game could be a little better. When you get to level 65 right now, it feels like you pretty much instantaneously get to 700, and there's not like a progression. Like, I hate to bring it back, but there's not like the watermark system that used to happen before, where you like progressed from 600 to 650, and then from 650 to 675, and then from 675 to 700. Like, there's not that natural progression. It is quite literally, okay, guys, I hit level 65. How do I get 700 as quickly as possible? Okay, go to the trade post, buy the cheapest, highest gear score gear that you can get, and then just spam these mutations until you get stuff, or spam these dungeons until you get stuff that's usable or halfway decent at 700, and then we'll worry about the next system in the future. Like, it feels too rushed to get to 700, and albeit a lot of like players like myself don't really stop to smell the roses at that point, but I would argue the mid game could use some slowing down. The early game the early game took me like 20 hours of gameplay maybe. I think it was less than that. I think getting to 65 probably took me like 14 hours in an ultra optimized path. The middle, which for most players is probably taking like a week. The middle game took me about 2 to 3 hours to progress through. That probably should be taking, for an average player that's not played the game, like at least a week to progress through the middle game, so you get familiar with a lot of the end game systems, so you actually play things like soul trials repeatedly. Like, I think they need to figure out a way to slow that down a little bit, and then 700 or 725 needs to be improved in terms of how quickly you can get that. It feels like if you were to graph the game's progression right now, like if I were to do the beginning game as blue, like it would take like this long to progress that much. The middle game, which spikes your power a lot, does not take much time. And then the end game takes a very, very long time, but slowly spikes your power. So it's like they need to figure out a way to fix that middle game too. But beginning game, I would 100% agree, is very, very good. Middle game, I'd argue, has the systems, but needs fine tuning. And then the end game needs to be looked at altogether.
A living roadmap that we have improvements to things and then overhaul.
Did a single world tour and got 700 gear score. Yeah, also we've mixed the names in here. They said ECRs, elite chest runs, and world tours are basically the same thing. An elite chest runs for one particular area. A world tour is a chain of elite chest runs. So yes, I would agree that 700 is probably a little too easy to get, and that is a big reason why. The elite chest runs or world tours, whatever you want to call them, they used to have a watermark system, so you slowly progress that number up. They got rid of that, and I think the umbral system was a little bit better, and I believe they're going to talk about that in this video, so I don't want to talk about it too much more.
To things, and one is for midterm, one is for long term, which maybe this feels like a good place to now start talking about long term. All right, now we're joined at the table by Kurt, our lead designer for world content, and we're going to talk about the third category on our document, which is in exploration. We want to share our early thinking and what we have in store for sometime in the future. As we said earlier, we're all in on endgame right now. We want to make replayable content. We want to make more things to chase, more frequent content updates. And some of the things we're thinking about are, we'll start with kind of our known things like new weapons, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So nothing to announce on specifics here, but we are in development on our next weapon, and we actually are going to be prototyping multiple weapons, and they'll be coming out at a more regular cadence in the future. Multiple weapons here, but we are in development on our next weapon, and we actually are going to be prototyping multiple weapons.
So they have one next weapon that is kind of like sort of ready, and then they're prototyping a few other ones. So that's like basically saying there's going to be at least 3 more weapons coming out. All right.
And they'll be coming out at a more regular cadence in the future.
Yep. And then zone up levels and new zones. So Kurt, you worked on the Cutlass Keys up level, for example.
That's right. Cutlass Keys was an experiment in what it would be like to create a max level.
I think there should be more built-in systems to join a company and group for the harder content like M3s and like the raids. I tend to agree that there needs to be some sort of system that they basically have done this, but they haven't made it cross-world. So if you go to like activities, you go to mutations. If I wanted to play Ennead, for example, I could create a lobby or I could enter the queue. The queue is cross-regional, so people just always spam the queue now. If they figured out how to make lobbies, or by cross-regional I mean cross-server within your region, they should be able to make that the lobby is visible to players within your region as well. Also, if they wanted to make this more advanced, I'd argue if you're on the East Coast of the United States, you should be able to play with the West Coast of the United States, and there might be other regions like that, like AP or like Asia Pacific should be able to queue with the West Coast of the US, in my opinion, if you like absolutely need it for these modes, just to shorten queue times. There's probably a lot of tech involved there. I imagine that they're not easily going to be able to do that, but that's something that like I think they could explore in terms of like end game, like down the line. But I think in the early to the midterm, they figured out a way to make this kind of group system so it was within like a region, and that you're able to like message the person that was able to create this, and they're able to message you back in game for like what they want. Like that would be a good like early to mid step to help remedy that. And I think the other thing too is like making queuable content like raids will help with that system too, because raids inherently involve a little bit of coordination. And anytime there's a little bit of coordination, people try to usually overcome that coordination with either a company, so like maybe you have a raid-based company that likes to do raids, or there'll be like a Discord that you can join to like kind of help with that as well. So I think that those kinds of systems will help kind of alleviate that friction a bit.
Playable zone in New World. As many of you know, the questing system and level up experience looks a lot different than it did when it first launched. And as part of that streamlined process to make it level up as immersive and fun as it could be, there are parts of the game that kind of got left out of that streamlined leveling quest line that we did. So we're looking at taking some of those zones.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. If you made that system for PvE stuff, that would be helpful. PvP, I agree, it's going to be a little bit too difficult.
That are no longer part of the level up experience, and repurposing them into max level explorable play spaces. And so one of the things that we're currently working on is a Reekwater up level to refresh Reekwater for max level players and bring new elements of progression and gameplay to the zone.
I think one of the things
I thought they'd do Morningdale first. They're actually doing Reek first? I don't think I've been to Morningdale in my fresh character. Like I went there to get the town, and that was it. But I've been to Reekwater a little bit, but I'm a little surprised. Reekwater is literally just the zone you go to if you want to get Azoth water, or I guess you can get oil there, but it's not as good as Weaver's Fen.
most excited about that is some of the collection elements that I've seen from your team that you guys are really investing in. I'm a player that really likes to go exploring. I like a little bit of PvP, and getting me out into the world to just kind of emergently discover what's there or go out and look for these things to collect is something that's my jam. I really enjoy that, so I'm excited to see what happens with these.
Yeah, the idea with Reekwater is that we want to try and create more of an open world experience than an on-rails quested experience.
Yeah.
There's so much content in the game, actually, that players don't really have a reason to explore because they hit max level, and there's like no reason to go back to this zone. That, you know, so like this is awesome. Like.
Yeah, and this in conjunction with some of the stuff that we've already talked about, like a reputation framework. These are going to be great systems to use going forward to make our endgame content more replayable for players.
Yeah, and there's more even than what's on what we're publishing and talking about today. But yeah, like taking all the content, give you reasons not just to go to it, maybe even for the first time, but again and again and again. And you know, I'm very excited about how we're kind of approaching doing our up levels as building the pieces to eventually culminate in that new zone.
The level 60 weapons don't exist anymore, SLB. Those got removed, and some players farm those in order to get the transmogs. But yeah, they don't exist anymore. There was a really long sword in particular that some tank players wanted because it was like really stupid long and probably shouldn't have been that long, but it was like the only way to get a sword that was that long in the game.
When that does finally come out. New World is always meant to be a sand park, and we started out all sand long ago, back in the alpha days, and we've got our park nice and built, and I think where we're at now, just we need to kind of find that right balance between sand and park, and that means bringing more sandbox. Like, we have the systems in place, so like when you see us say things like influence.
So when you're saying sand and park, this is like sand would be short for sandbox. This is like do whatever the heck you want. We're not going to guide you through this experience. A game that would be akin to a sandbox is the game I keep bringing up a lot, which is Albion. Albion is literally sandbox. There is about 5 to 10 minutes of story, and then after that, they drop you off and say, have fun with it. We're not going to guide you through the rest of this experience. The park experience is I am on rails, I'm going down this roller coaster, the path is given, and I can't go off the rails. So it's like you don't have as much exploration, and the games that tend to do very, very well are kind of a combination of both. You think of like Baldur's Gate 3, for example. That's a game that is very sand and very park oriented. There is a clear story, there is a narrative that is involved, but as you progress through that narrative, there are a lot of side objectives that people can get involved with. They have unique items, there's unique dialogue, there's unique stories, and it's very, very interesting to get involved with that whole kind of system and dynamic. So I agree with his statement.
Tower, claim siege system, territory overhaul.
Sand gets
These are things that players have been asking
everywhere
for, and I think everybody's got a different idea of what to do. But you know, to me, like I would even conceptually say the company hall ties with that, because like these are things we need a way to feel like you have a home in the game, that you're doing some kind of a base building loop, and that's what the territory system is meant to be. But it's just, I think we can
that
get
you
it
and your
there.
friends, that you and your company have goals to be able to build up and activities to do together, and feel like you're making meaningful progression and impact on what those things are. Again, together you're building up, and I think that's a big thing. I love those company style guild halls and other things that you can build in other games, and I'm excited to see what we do there. I think
one small ask for them too is, if you're going to build a system like this, I think that they should increase the amount of company member slots per company. So right now it's a maximum of 100. I think it should probably be increased to like 200 to 250 or something like that. If they're going to include a system like this, is also like allows maybe more experienced companies to get newer members in to help out with some of the other activities and kind of get them involved as well. And while they might not be involved with every sense of the activity, I think it's just generally better to alleviate that friction to get newer players involved with the other experience.
That's something I'm personally going to enjoy a lot.
Also, like making it more than just like the top companies on the server get to participate. Like it's more like, you know, anyone can start a company, build something. Like they have a little slice of the world.
That's a fair take too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think but like the reason why I bring up that other point is, in a war situated company, there are like 60 to 80 slots of just war players, and there's 50 slots in a war. So like, say I wanted to have someone else that wanted to participate maybe in those wars, also wanted to do some of these other activities, like they might not necessarily fit in that exact bucket, so we wouldn't be able to like participate in this activity if you're like kind of more war oriented. But like that's like one of the, that's like, I think a gripe for the top 1% of players, and I'm like I'm selfish in that regard, but I think that could be a little bit better.
It's also worth mentioning that we're not just focused on overhauling or revamping existing locations and systems, but we are ideating on new locations in the world that we can add to New World to progress the narrative and expand the world in new, exciting ways as well.
Some of the early looks on some of the new areas and raid style stuff that we're prototyping.
How about the relationship between companies? I mean, I think if they were to go back in time and make it ideal, I think the faction system in New World would be like more along the lines of company v company. I think that just turns out to be better, and then you just naturally have factions, right? Like you have companies that might be mercenaries that could be for any faction. You have companies that are like, hey, we're aligned with I'm stealing from Albion again because I'm thinking about that. Like, I'm aligned with Bob or whatever. Or I'm aligned with Furries, which is another alliance name for some stupid reason I don't really understand, or whatever alliance that you have. So you have your alliance, you have your companies, and then your alliances are effectively what factions are right now. Maybe, but that doesn't, I don't know how you tie faction rewards into this. And that's, again, a little bit more towards the sandbox experience. But again, I think that would be ideal. It's just I feel like New World's progressed from that a decent bit, and it would be kind of hard to introduce that system at this point. So it's like the benefit that you'd obtain from introducing that system at this point probably doesn't outweigh the cost of making the system. So I don't think it makes sense for them to prioritize that kind of thing, but it's something that I think would be better if they changed.
Yeah.
Cool looking.
Yeah, me too.
Some of the coolest art assets I've seen. So I'm excited to see players get those things.
Yeah. Well, we won't go into any more details than that, although there were no details at all. But we won't talk anymore about some of the ideas. But the big takeaway is, like, we're excited. We hear the players. New World is a wonderful world to just hang out in and play in, and we just need reasons to do that more and
Absolutely.
ways to go deeper. That's what we're looking at.
Yep. Nice. Is there anything else in this, or are they just, we got 2 minutes to run?
Wow, that was a lot of information. Thank you to all of the folks, Dan, you and the group, for sharing all that information. Really appreciate it. I don't know about you all, but I think I found it all exciting. If I had to pick one thing, though, I think the seasonal servers are just going to change the way people play the game, and I think that's awesome. Really, really cool.
For me, it's the OPR map. I've been waiting a while. I'm excited to bring something out for players. I think they're going to like it.
I'm just excited to go home and ride my turkey mount.
Gobble, gobble.
You know it's scripted when Dave's talking about the OPR map to some extent, but I still love Dave. The turkey mount is amazing, and I kind of want to figure out a way to obtain that. I forget how you obtain that in the current game, but they added in the turkey mount, and it actually is amazing, and like I kind of want to get that. Probably gonna be doing that after this.
Gobble gobble.
My goodness. Yeah, we talked a lot about like what's coming next and things that we're thinking of for the future. But there is something that's coming up that we haven't talked about, which is free trials. So this is something that's on console.
Oh, you have to buy it? Oh no! I thought you got it from the. Oh man, I thought you got it from the actual event. I got so excited. If I'm gonna buy it, I don't know if I'm gonna buy it though. I don't know if I like it that much.
If you have friends or family who've been wanting to try out New World Eternum, this is a really great opportunity for them to hop in and try it out for free. So look for more details on that on the site.
And beyond that, the one thing I really want to do is just a big thank you, heartfelt thank you. Like the team put their heart and soul into making New World Eternum, and
the best
when you
10K
see
marks I've ever
so
spent
many
on the
people
game.
come in and play and experience it and have a good time, it makes it all worth it. Feels really good. So like on behalf of the entire team, thank you to all the players. Like we couldn't be more appreciative. And with that, we will see you in Eternum.
His glasses are crooked on his nose. It's a small thing, but no, this is about the best update that I think they've had. The thing that this did very, very well is it gave clear guidance on what was going to happen. It gave reasons on why it was happening to some extent, and gave like very plausible reasons. And I feel like the bias here too is kicking in, where I look at this roadmap and like all this kind of ties together. Like a lot of these systems tie between crafting, it ties into PvP, it ties into PvE, and like it ties like the world together in terms of like a good amount of the system, in particular the kind of the seasonal like reset world, whatever you want to call it, the full loot world for PvP, like that 100% will tie a lot of the systems together. I'm really looking forward to it, even though I'm not usually a player that likes to participate in like 1v1 environments. I am the tank dude, I'm the utility support dude. I am not the I'm gonna find the cheesiest build to kill you build. There I think is 100% is the AGS deserves criticism too in terms of the recent balancing. Like we talked about this a little bit before. I don't know if we talked about this now, but the fact that the elemental band is not currently disabled as an artifact is beyond alarming and doesn't make any sense. The fact that this triggers off of attunements and damage over times, even though it says it doesn't, makes this incredibly imbalanced. And there are other artifacts like this, but I'd say elemental band is by far the most OP artifact that has existed for this long of a period of time. Like usually there's something that's broken, it gets patched out immediately. It is not in this case, and it's something that I think AGS could really look to improve as well. But they've done a good job with the like iterating what they're going to do going forward. There's also about like the short-term fixes I still think need to be a little bit better. It's been, imagine, a decent amount harder because you have to be able to publish something for PC and both Xbox and PlayStation. So there's a lot of different like platforms there, but if they can figure that out, I think they'll be in a pretty good spot. It's just the fact that it's taken a month to get some bugs and exploits that have been kind of shown either temporary disabled / fixed is kind of alarming in my opinion.